What if skipping breakfast could actually add years to your life? Welcome to Elder Secrets, where we uncover the untold wisdom of the world's longest living souls. In today's episode, this 100-year-old doesn't eat breakfast. Here's why. We dive into a surprising daily habit that defies everything you've been taught. Let's unlock the secret.
What if the one meal, the one we've always been told is absolutely essential every single day, is actually something we could thrive without? Imagine this, a 102-year-old woman in Okinawa, Japan. She walks 3 miles daily, her mind is sharp as a tack, she's out tending her garden, and here's the real kicker. She hasn't eaten breakfast in over 70 years. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're taking on a really fascinating puzzle, trying to unravel the secrets behind these extraordinary lifespans and maybe challenge some very deeply ingrained nutritional wisdom. We'll dive into Margaret Chen's remarkable case, explore the surprising history behind this whole breakfast is essential myth. We'll also dig into the cutting-edge science of intermittent fasting and try to understand how cultural conditioning, shapes our relationship with food. By the end of this deep dive, you'll, I think, gain a whole new perspective. You'll understand the biological mechanisms behind why skipping breakfast might actually enhance your health. You'll learn to see the crucial difference between genuine hunger and just, a conditioned urge to eat. And maybe you'll discover some practical strategies that could truly add years to your life and, importantly, life to your years. So let's start with Margaret Chen. At 102, she truly defies expectations. She moves with this grace and vitality that honestly makes her seem decades younger. We're talking about someone who's out there walking 3 miles every morning, meticulously tending her vegetable garden. Her posture is remarkably straight, her movements fluid, and her eyes have this sharpness, It'd be enviable in someone half her age. She can recall details from conversations decades ago, just like that. It's truly incredible.
It absolutely is. And when researchers from the Okinawa Centenarian Study interviewed her, this was back in 2018, they were understandably quite intrigued. They dug into pretty much every aspect of her life, her genetics, sure, but also her social connections, physical activity levels, sleep patterns, her overall diet quality. And while all those factors were definitely positive contributors, one habit really stood out.
Okay, so what was it? What did these researchers find that was so astonishing about her daily routine?
Well, it's genuinely remarkable. Margaret revealed that she hasn't eaten breakfast since she was 30 years old. That's since 1952. And the fascinating thing here is that it wasn't because of poverty, not really, or any illness. It was a completely deliberate choice, though it did start out of necessity. Back in 52, she was a seamstress, and money was tight. She literally found herself having to choose buy fabric for her work or buy food for breakfast.
Wow, so she skipped it, just temporarily planning to start again when things improved.
Exactly. That was the plan. She initially skipped that morning meal purely out of necessity, fully intending to resume it once her finances were better. But then something really unexpected happened. Margaret started noticing that her energy levels felt much more stable through the day. You know those mid-morning crashes. The ones she dealt with for years, they just vanished. Even her chronic digestive issues, things that had bothered her since childhood, they started to resolve. And maybe the biggest surprise for her, she felt significantly more mentally alert and focused during her morning work hours, way more than before. That was her big aha moment.
So she just kept it up, not just for a few months, but for 7 decades. That's an extraordinary level of consistency.
Absolutely extraordinary. She's maintained this pattern, an incredible consistency for over 70 years. Think about it, through world wars, major economic shifts, personal losses, raising 4 kids. This isn't some temporary diet fad. It's a fundamental part of her life. And her health absolutely reflects it. She's never been hospitalized for a serious illness, takes 0 prescription medications. Her last kind of major health concern was a minor ankle sprain from gardening 3 years ago. That's it.
Incredible. And what does her typical day look like now, specifically around meals?
Her routine is quite specific, yeah. Her first meal is usually around 1 p.m. Then she has a substantial dinner around 6 p.m. This creates pretty consistently about a 19-hour daily fast. And what she eats during that window is just as important. It's traditional Okinawan foods, lots of vegetables, some fish, occasional pork, those same as Okinawan sweet potatoes, plenty of green tea. She also practices hara hachibu, stopping when she's about 80% full, not completely stuffed.
Right, so it's not just the when she eats, but also the what and the how much. Interesting. What about the less tangible benefits beyond the purely physical?
That's a really great point, because for Margaret, it's much more than just, a diet strategy. She actually views her morning fast as a profound time, a time for mental clarity, even spiritual reflection. She uses those occasional hunger pangs not as a signal of distress, but more like reminders for gratitude. Gratitude for the food she will eventually eat and just for being alive. She sees the discipline involved as a form of mental exercise, something that keeps her mind sharp and her willpower strong. And it turns out she's not entirely alone in this. Many other Okinawan centenarians unknowingly practice forms of intermittent fasting. Often it stems from times of food scarcity in their youth, or just from cultural practices like harahachibu.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit. Margaret's story, I mean, it seriously challenges our deeply held beliefs about breakfast, right? We've been told since we were kids it's the most important meal. But what's the real truth behind those claims? Where did that idea even come from?
Well, if you look closely, the whole idea of breakfast being most important is largely a 20th century invention. A marketing product, really. It wasn't based on long-standing nutritional science. It kind of kicked off in the late 1800s with figures like John Harvey Kellogg, yes, the cornflakes guy. He promoted cereals as part of his health regimens.
So it started with early advertisers, okay. But when did it really get cemented in our culture?
The real push, the big one, came in the 1940s and 50s. Food companies invested heavily in advertising campaigns. Specifically, there was a 1944 Grape Nuts cereal campaign. They launched the slogan, and I'm quoting here, "Breakfast is the most important meal of the day." This wasn't based on research. It was purely 100% a marketing message designed to sell cereal.
That's fascinating and a bit disturbing. But what about the science? I seem to remember hearing about studies showing breakfast eaters were healthier.
You're right, there were studies. But the research that followed, much of it funded by the food industry in the 50s and 60s, had significant methodological flaws, big ones. They compared people who ate breakfast to people who skipped it, but they didn't properly control for things like overall diet quality, lifestyle habits, or socioeconomic status. Often the people skipping breakfast were doing so because of stress or poverty or other difficult circumstances. So they reached these incorrect conclusions that missing the meal itself caused poor health, rather than it being, a symptom of other underlying issues. Classic correlation mistaken for causation.
And culturally, especially after World War II, it sounds like breakfast almost became like a moral issue.
Precisely. It got tangled up with family values, with success. Mothers were actually made to feel neglectful if they didn't provide these big, substantial breakfasts for their families. It became a real societal expectation.
But newer science, more controlled science, it tells a different story, doesn't it? What have the more recent unbiased studies revealed?
Absolutely. Recent meta-analyses, which look at lots of studies together, show that many of those supposed benefits of eating breakfast they disappear when you properly control for those confounding variables. For instance, there was a 2019 study, I think it was in the Journal of Nutritional Biochemistry. They had healthy adults skip breakfast for 6 weeks. The results: no negative effects on metabolic health. In fact, some participants even saw improvements in things like insulin sensitivity and fat oxidation. And another really interesting one from the University of Alabama at Birmingham, they looked at overweight women. The group skipping breakfast actually lost more weight, had better insulin sensitivity, and reported no negative effects on their metabolism or even their mood.
Wow. That just goes against everything we've been taught. But if we look back even further, like way back to our ancestors, what does an evolutionary perspective tell us about morning meals?
Yeah, from an evolutionary standpoint, for the vast majority of human history, our ancestors simply didn't eat breakfast as we know it today. Hunter-gatherers. They typically ate their first meal in the afternoon after they'd spent time foraging or hunting. Morning hunger was completely normal, expected even. And even historically, if you look at ancient civilizations, structured morning meals were pretty rare among common people. The whole 3 meals a day pattern is actually a relatively recent invention. It was driven largely by industrial work schedules, needing workers fueled up at specific times. This really helps explain why someone like Margaret thrives without breakfast. She's essentially working with her biology, not against it. The human body is remarkably well adapted to function effectively, even quite efficiently, during periods without food.
That's incredibly liberating, especially for someone like me who often just isn't hungry first thing in the morning. It means if you're not hungry then, or if you feel kind of sluggish after breakfast, or you just prefer to eat later, you're not doing anything wrong. You're just listening to your body's natural rhythms.
Exactly. It doesn't mean breakfast is inherently bad for everyone. Some people genuinely feel better and perform better eating in the morning. That's fine too. But the key takeaway here is that it's absolutely not universally necessary. And skipping it isn't universally harmful. Individual variation is completely normal. and it should be respected. This knowledge really gives you the freedom, doesn't it? The freedom to choose what feels best for your unique body.
So, okay, how do we make sense of all this? Let's really dive into the fascinating science now that seems to back up Margaret's unconventional lifestyle. What's going on biologically?
Right. So at its core, intermittent fasting, or IF, is simply the practice of cycling between periods of eating and, well, not eating, fasting. Margaret's 19-hour daily fast is one pretty powerful form, but there are many variations. You hear about 16-hour daily fasts, the 16.8 method, or even alternate day fasting. What they all share is this fundamental metabolic shift. When you're in a fed state after eating, your insulin levels are up, and your body's primarily using glucose for energy or storing it. But when you enter a fasted state, different and arguably quite powerful metabolic programs get activated.
And what's the typical timeline for that shift? How long does it usually take after eating before your body starts tapping into those different programs?
Generally, the transition begins around 12 hours after your last meal. That's when your liver glycogen stores start to deplete, and your body begins shifting towards burning fat for fuel instead. By about 16 to 18 hours of fasting, most people will enter a state of ketosis. That's where the liver starts producing ketones from stored fat. Ketones are an alternative, highly efficient fuel source, especially for the brain.
Okay, so the body gets a chance to switch fuel sources, burn fat. But what are the key biological mechanisms? What's actually happening inside our cells during these fasting periods?
One of the most profound processes activated during extended fasting is something called autophagy. Think of it as cellular self-eating. It's a critical cleaning mechanism where cells break down and recycle old, damaged proteins and other cellular components. Like your body's built-in recycling and repair crew. It's absolutely crucial for cellular health, preventing the buildup of junk that contributes to aging and many diseases. In fact, Dr. Yoshinori Ohsumi won the 2016 Nobel Prize for his groundbreaking work uncovering the mechanisms of autophagy. So Margaret's daily 19-hour fast, it essentially gives her cells a significant daily tune-up, maximizing this vital repair process. Fasting also triggers a boost in something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor, or BDNF. This is a protein that acts like fertilizer for your brain cells. It promotes neuron growth, survival, and protection. Higher levels of BDNF are linked to better cognitive function, improved mood, and even protection against neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. This likely plays a huge role in Margaret's remarkable mental clarity at 102.
That's incredible. So it's not just physical benefits, but significant brain health advantages too. What else is happening, say, hormonally or metabolically?
Well, we also see dramatically improved insulin sensitivity. This is absolutely crucial for preventing type 2 diabetes and metabolic syndrome. When your body regularly gets a break from processing food, and thus a break from high insulin levels, your cells become much more responsive to insulin when it is present. That's a cornerstone of good metabolic health. Then there's hormone optimization. Human growth hormone levels can increase during fasting, which is beneficial for preserving muscle mass and bone density as we age. Norepinephrine, a hormone and neurotransmitter, tends to rise, which can boost metabolism and help mobilize fat for burning. Even cortisol, often thought of as just the stress hormone, tends to follow a more natural, healthy rhythm with intermittent fasting, potentially improving sleep quality and stress resilience. And there's emerging research, really exciting stuff, showing that prolonged fasting can trigger immune system regeneration. It seems to clear out old, worn-out immune cells and stimulate the production of new, more effective ones, essentially giving the immune system a reset. This might help explain Margaret's amazing resistance to infections and her overall robust health. Oh, and the cardiovascular benefits are significant too. Studies consistently link intermittent fasting to things like reduced blood pressure, improved cholesterol profiles, decreased markers of inflammation, just overall better cardiovascular health.
And I find this part really intriguing. Animal studies almost always show that intermittent fasting extends lifespan. Now, obviously, we can't do those exact same controlled lifespan studies in humans.
No, ethically and practically impossible. But the biological mechanisms we see benefiting animals, the autophagy, the improved insulin sensitivity, the stress resistance, they appear to be highly conserved in humans. It's certainly a very compelling piece of the puzzle, pointing toward longevity benefits for us too. It's really a profound cascade, isn't it? By simply stepping back from constant eating, we're not just fasting, we're effectively triggering this ancient biological software update. It systematically repairs our cells, optimizes our hormones, rewires our metabolism to burn fat efficiently. It's like activating our body's inherent longevity program, just like Margaret has instinctively done for decades. It is important to remember, though, that not all intermittent fasting approaches are the same, and how individuals respond can vary. And crucially, these benefits are most pronounced when the fasting is combined with high-quality nutrition during the eating periods, like Margaret's traditional Okinawan diet. Just skipping breakfast and then loading up on processed foods later, that's not going to achieve the same results. Not even close.
This makes me wonder, though, if Margaret's story and all this science about fasting are so compelling, what else might we be getting wrong about nutrition? What other rules have we just blindly accepted?
Well, one of the biggest dogmas that immediately comes to mind is the whole idea of frequent eating. The advice to eat every 2 to 3 hours to keep your metabolism stoked or maintain stable blood sugar. That assumption is actually working against our inherent biology in many ways. Humans evolved as opportunistic feeders. We thrived in conditions of feast and famine, not constant grazing.
So wait, you're saying that constant eating, the way many people eat today, is actually a problem. What's happening inside our bodies then?
Exactly. In many cases, yes. This constant eating keeps insulin levels chronically elevated. Over time, this can lead to insulin resistance, which is the precursor to type 2 diabetes and a host of other metabolic issues. Plus, this constant availability of glucose basically prevents the body from ever needing to efficiently access its stored fat for fuel. This leads to what we call metabolic inflexibility. Your body becomes overly dependent on glucose and struggles to switch to burning fat. This is why people experience those dramatic energy crashes if a meal is delayed even slightly. Margaret's compressed eating window, her daily fast, allows her insulin levels to drop significantly every single day. This enhances her insulin sensitivity and maintains that crucial metabolic flexibility.
Okay, and what about that urge or that advice to eat immediately upon waking? We're often told to break the fast right away, but doesn't our body have its own wake-up system, like with cortisol? How does eating then interact with that?
You're hitting on a really key point there. Your cortisol naturally peaks in the morning. Its job is to mobilize stored energy glucose and fatty acids, effectively waking up your body and brain, providing fuel for the day ahead. Eating immediately upon waking can actually interfere with this natural process. It sort of tells your body, hey, don't worry about tapping into reserves, external fuel is here. Over time, this can create a dependence on that immediate external fuel. This aligns perfectly with why many people who skip breakfast, like Margaret, report feeling more alert and energetic in the mornings. They're allowing their body's natural energy mobilizing systems to work optimally. And what's also fascinating, tying into this, is that research on circadian rhythms suggests our insulin sensitivity is actually highest in the evening and lowest in the morning. So from a purely metabolic standpoint, the evening might be the optimal time for our largest meal, Margaret's 6 p.m. dinner. It aligns perfectly with this natural rhythm.
That's counterintuitive. And for all the fitness buffs out there, what about the intense focus on protein timing? Needing that protein shake immediately after a workout.
Yes, the anabolic window myth. That's another area where the science has really evolved. More recent research strongly suggests that the total amount of protein consumed over a 24 to 48-hour period is far more important for muscle protein synthesis than the precise timing right after a workout. Margaret maintains her muscle mass beautifully into her 100s, primarily getting her protein in the evening. She's a living demonstration of this principle.
And finally, there's this modern, almost fear of hunger. It seems like we're conditioned to panic at the slightest pang.
It absolutely is a modern phenomenon, particularly in affluent societies. Mild hunger pangs now often trigger anxiety, pushing us to eat immediately, even when our bodies have vast amounts of stored energy available. Learning to recognize and even tolerate mild hunger, understanding it's not an emergency, can be incredibly psychologically liberating. It can help prevent overeating driven by anxiety rather than true need. Margaret's comfortable, calm relationship with the sensation of hunger is, in itself, a profound form of psychological freedom. It frees her from being constantly preoccupied with food.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting for me. You mentioned circadian rhythms. Margaret's eating pattern seems to align perfectly with her natural internal clocks. It's like she's dancing with her biology.
She truly is. A beautiful way to put it. Our circadian clocks, these internal timekeepers, coordinate virtually every physiological process: metabolism, digestion, hormone release, sleep-wake cycles, aligning them with a 24-hour day-night cycle. And these clocks, especially the peripheral clocks in our organs like the liver and pancreas, are very strongly influenced by when we eat. Meal timing is a major cue.
So our body's ability to process food isn't static, it changes throughout the day.
Precisely. Take insulin sensitivity, for example. As we discussed, it seems to be highest in the evening and lowest in the early morning for most people. Margaret's substantial 6 p.m. dinner leverages this natural peak in sensitivity, meaning her body is optimally primed to handle those nutrients efficiently. Conversely, eating a large breakfast, especially a high-carb one, would occur when insulin sensitivity is naturally lower, potentially leading to less efficient glucose processing and larger blood sugar spikes.
And our hunger hormones, they follow this daily rhythm too, right?
They absolutely do. Ghrelin, often called the hunger hormone, is naturally lowest in the early morning. This helps explain why many people genuinely aren't hungry when they first wake up. Ghrelin levels naturally rise throughout the day, typically peaking in the evening, aligning perfectly with when Margaret eats her main meal. On the flip side, leptin, the satiety hormone that signals fullness, tends to be higher in the morning, further supporting the biological inclination to eat less, or perhaps nothing, early in the day.
And we touched on this earlier, but that morning cortisol peak naturally mobilizes stored energy. So Margaret's morning fast just allows that system to work without interference.
Exactly. It lets our body tap into its own readily available fuel stores, providing sustainable energy for her morning activities, like that impressive 3-mile walk, without needing to rely on immediate food intake. And remember autophagy, that cellular cleaning process. It's also strongly influenced by circadian rhythms. It's enhanced during the fasting state and appears to peak during the late night and early morning hours. Margaret's extended morning fast effectively maximizes the time her body spends in this crucial cellular maintenance and repair mode each day. Plus, finishing her last meal several hours before bedtime, as Margaret does around 6 p.m., allows digestion to largely complete before she goes to sleep. This contributes significantly to higher quality, more restorative sleep, which is absolutely fundamental for longevity and overall health. We're even learning that time-restricted eating, like Margaret practices, can enhance the rhythmic expression of our core circadian clock genes. This helps optimize countless cellular processes for better health and healthier aging. The when we eat matters profoundly. We see this in studies on shift workers, for example. Disrupting natural eating rhythms often leads to negative health effects, even if calorie intake and food quality remain the same. It powerfully shows that meal timing itself is a critical factor. Margaret's pattern feels natural to her because it works with her innate biology. It aligns her hunger signals, her energy cycles, and her digestive processes. This deep biological alignment might be one of the key secrets to healthy aging, especially since we know circadian rhythms tend to weaken as we get older. Maintaining that strong rhythm could be critical.
So how does Margaret's remarkable experience and all this fascinating science connect to the grand canvas of aging itself? Let's talk about this idea of metabolic flexibility. What is that exactly?
Metabolic flexibility is essentially your body's ability to efficiently switch between burning different fuel sources, primarily glucose from carbohydrates, and fat from stored body fat or dietary fat, based on what's available and what the body needs at that moment. This ability was absolutely essential for human survival throughout evolution. It allowed us to thrive whether food was abundant or scarce. But our modern lifestyles, particularly constant access to food and high-carb diets, often compromise this flexibility.
And what's the cost of losing that flexibility as we age?
The cost is high, yeah. A loss of metabolic flexibility is increasingly recognized as a hallmark of the aging process itself, and also a key factor in the development of many chronic diseases like type 2 diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and even some neurodegenerative conditions. Frequent eating, especially high-carb eating, keeps the body stuck in glucose burning mode, hindering its ability to effectively tap into and burn fat stores. Metabolically inflexible individuals often experience those wild swings in energy, persistent cravings, difficulty managing weight, and are generally more susceptible to metabolic diseases.
So Margaret's consistent 19-hour fast is essentially giving her body a daily workout, forcing it to maintain this fuel switching capability.
That's a great way to put it, yes. Her consistent daily fast regularly forces her body to make that metabolic switch from glucose to fat burning. This keeps both pathways efficient and active. She's maintaining a level of metabolic flexibility into her 100s that many people sadly lose decades earlier, and the benefits derived from this flexibility are profound. Better insulin sensitivity, improved cardiovascular health markers, enhanced cognitive function, increased resilience to stress, all contributing factors that help explain her remarkable disease avoidance and longevity. It's not just about living longer, it's about living healthier for longer, increasing health span.
And is this decline in metabolic flexibility with age just something that happens, an inevitable part of getting older, or can we actually influence it?
It's definitely not inevitable. While there might be a natural tendency for it to decline somewhat with age, lifestyle factors play a massive role. Studies have actually shown that healthy centenarians, like those in Okinawa, often maintain significantly better metabolic flexibility than much younger individuals who already have metabolic diseases. This strongly points to lifestyle, not just age, as the primary determinant. At the cellular level, practices like intermittent fasting enhance the function of our mitochondria, the powerhouses of our cells. IFECF promotes processes like mitochondrial biogenesis, creating new mitochondria, and mitophagy, clearing out damaged ones. Healthy mitochondria are absolutely key to energy production, cellular health, and longevity. Fasting also activates different genetic programs than constant feeding does. It helps achieve a healthy balance between building processes, anabolic, and breaking down and recycling process, catabolic, like autophagy. This balance is essential for healthy aging.
And you mentioned ketones earlier, produced during fasting. That's a huge factor in Margaret's mental sharpness, isn't it?
Very likely, yes. Ketones can supply up to 70% of the brain's energy needs during extended fasting. They provide a more stable, efficient energy source compared to glucose for the brain. Plus, ketones themselves seem to have direct neuroprotective properties, reducing inflammation and oxidative stress in the brain. This is almost certainly a significant contributor to Margaret's remarkable mental clarity and cognitive resilience so late in life. And that brings up inflammation. Chronic low-grade inflammation is now understood as a major driver of aging, and most chronic disease is sometimes called inflammaging. Metabolic inflexibility contributes significantly to this. Intermittent fasting helps reduce inflammation through multiple pathways, enhancing autophagy, improving insulin sensitivity, optimizing mitochondrial function, and reducing oxidative stress. Beyond just preventing disease, think about the quality of life aspect. Good metabolic flexibility translates to stable energy levels throughout the day, less dependence on constant meals, better resilience to stressors, and often improved physical and mental performance. It enhances overall well-being. Margaret's example offers really incredible hope. It shows that metabolic function doesn't have to drastically decline. It can be maintained and perhaps even enhanced throughout life with the right lifestyle practices, like mindful eating patterns.
That really makes me wonder then, if this approach can be so beneficial, why do we view hunger so differently in modern society compared to someone like Margaret, who seems quite comfortable with it?
It's a stark contrast, isn't it? Her comfort with, and even acceptance of, periodic hunger is worlds away from the typical modern Western view, which often sees hunger as an emergency signal, something to be avoided at all costs. But if you look historically and across different cultures, periodic fasting wasn't just normal. It was often viewed as beneficial, sometimes even spiritually significant.
Right. I know some ancient Greek physicians actually prescribed fasting for certain conditions.
They absolutely did. Hippocrates, often called the father of medicine, famously said something like, "Everyone has a doctor in him, we just have to help it in its work." And he often recommended fasting as a way to let the body heal itself. Traditional Chinese medicine, which likely had some influence on Margaret's cultural background and understanding, places a strong emphasis on moderation, balance, and recognizes the value of occasional food restriction for maintaining health and harmony. And even within the Okinawan tradition itself, there's the practice of harahachi bud, eating only until you're 80% full. That's a cornerstone of their longevity philosophy, and it naturally encourages a state of mild caloric restriction, or at least avoids chronic overfeeding. Margaret's extended daily fast could be seen as a natural, perhaps more pronounced, evolution of this principle of moderation. And let's not forget the spiritual dimension. Countless religious traditions worldwide incorporate fasting as a regular practice for purification, for mental clarity, for spiritual discipline. They recognize this deep connection between physical discipline, mental focus, and overall well-being. This broad historical and cultural context really highlights how far we, in modern society, have perhaps drifted from a more natural, balanced relationship with food and the normal sensation of hunger. We've medicalized and pathologized something that used to be seen as normal, even beneficial.
So let's try to wrap this up. Recapping our deep dive today, Margaret Chen's incredible 70-year story, the debunking of that pervasive breakfast myth, the cutting-edge science of intermittent fasting with its really amazing benefits like autophagy, boosting BDNF for brain health, improving insulin sensitivity, understanding the critical role of aligning our eating patterns with our natural circadian rhythms, and the profound importance of maintaining metabolic flexibility as we age. It all points to a really powerful connection, doesn't it? A connection between when we eat, maybe just as much as what we eat, and our long-term health and longevity. This deep dive, I hope, shows that listening to your own body's natural rhythms and signals, rather than just rigidly following conventional rules or, marketing slogans from decades ago, can be incredibly beneficial. It really is about finding what truly works for you. So the final thought to leave you with is this. What does Margaret Chen's 70-year breakfast rebellion truly reveal about what else we might have been told is essential for our health that simply isn't true?